Lauren Miller, the irritated sales manager, settles into her seat beside Sergeant Adam Brooks, whose calm demeanor and military uniform offer a stark contrast to her frazzled state. As the plane's cabin hums with the muffled voices of passengers settling in, Lauren barely glances at Adam, masking her annoyance at the delay with a curt acknowledgement. Adam, gazing out the window, remains silent, seemingly oblivious to her mood. The tension begins to build with the first minor interaction. Lauren, attempting to stow her bag under the seat, struggles slightly. Adam, noticing her trouble, reaches out to assist. "Here, let me help," he says, his tone neutral. Lauren's irritation flares. "Thanks, but I've got it," she snaps, her voice sharper than intended. Adam withdraws his hand without a word, his calm demeanor unshaken. Moments later, the flight attendants begin the safety demonstration. Lauren, restless, mutters under her breath about the inefficiency of the airline. Adam finally looks her way, his gaze steady but unreadable. "Flight delays happen," he remarks quietly. "Not much we can do about it." Lauren shoots him a withering glance, her irritation now tinged with embarrassment at being called out, even indirectly. As the flight takes off, Lauren can't help but notice the way Adam carries himself. His upright posture, his measured breathing, everything about him radiates control and discipline, which only seems to highlight her own frazzled state. Determined not to engage further, she pulls out her tablet and begins scrolling through emails, trying to drown out the low hum of the plane and her growing self-awareness. The first jolt of turbulence disrupts her concentration, and she clutches the armrest instinctively. Adam, noticing her discomfort, speaks up. "Not a fan of flying?" he asks, his voice calm, almost reassuring. Lauren hesitates, her pride warring with her anxiety. "It's not my favorite," she admits grudgingly, her fingers tightening around the armrest. What begins as an innocuous exchange spirals into unexpected territory. As the turbulence worsens, Lauren's anxiety becomes more pronounced. Adam, still calm, offers a distraction. "I can teach you a trick to deal with turbulence," he says. Reluctantly, she listens as he explains a breathing exercise. To her surprise, it works, and she feels a small measure of gratitude. But the peace is short-lived. During the in-flight meal service, the conversation takes a surprising turn. A fellow passenger, noticing Adam's uniform, begins a conversation that quickly veers into uncomfortable territory. "So, how many people have you killed?" the man asks bluntly, his tone both curious and disrespectful. Lauren freezes, her fork halfway to her mouth, while Adam's expression hardens. "I serve to protect my country," Adam responds evenly, his voice devoid of emotion. The man smirks. "Yeah, but come on, you must have some stories." Adam's grip on his cup tightens, but he remains composed. Lauren, however, finds herself bristling at the man's audacity. "That's enough," she snaps, surprising herself as much as the man. "Show some respect." The man mutters an apology, but the tension lingers. Adam offers Lauren a small nod of thanks, and for the first time, she sees a flicker of something behind his calm facade. Gratitude, perhaps, or even respect. As the flight progresses, the layers of their interaction begin to peel back. Lauren, emboldened by her earlier defense of Adam, decides to probe. "So, what made you join the military?" she asks. Adam hesitates, his gaze shifting to the window before he answers. "Family tradition," he says simply. "My father served, and his father before him." Lauren nods, sensing there's more to the story but not wanting to pry. Their conversation drifts to lighter topics, favorite travel destinations, the best coffee in New York, but there's an undercurrent of tension that neither can fully shake. When the plane begins its descent, an announcement crackles over the intercom. Due to weather conditions, their arrival will be delayed further. The cabin fills with groans, and Lauren's irritation returns full force. "This day just keeps getting better," she mutters. Adam glances at her, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Could be worse," he says. "We could be stuck on the tarmac." Lauren can't help but laugh, the tension easing slightly. As they disembark, she realizes she's learned more about this stranger in a few hours than she has about some colleagues she's worked with for years. Adam, with a slight nod, bids her farewell, his calm demeanor once again firmly in place. The flight delay that began as a minor inconvenience has turned into an unexpectedly profound encounter, one that leaves Lauren questioning her own snap judgments and wondering about the man who, with his unshakable calm, managed to unsettle and inspire her in equal measure. Lauren, her nerves frayed and her patience nearly gone, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The soft hum of the aircraft cabin seemed louder as her irritation simmered. She glanced at Adam, still seated with his perfect posture, his uniform impeccable, and his gaze steady as he stared out of the window. It was as though the turbulence, the delays, and the cramped conditions of the economy cabin didn't touch him. Lauren crossed her arms and let out a heavy sigh. "You must be loving this," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. Adam turned his head slightly toward her, his calm expression unchanged. "Loving what exactly?" he asked, his voice polite and measured. "This," Lauren said, gesturing around. "Being crammed into this tin can, surrounded by screaming kids and people who think deodorant is optional." She raised an eyebrow at him. "Or do they train you in the military to enjoy suffering?" Adam's lips twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "Not exactly," he replied, his voice even. "We're trained to handle discomfort and focus on what we can control. Complaining doesn't fix much." His calm response only fanned the flames of Lauren's irritation. She let out a short laugh, her voice carrying more derision than humor. "Oh, I see. Always the hero, right? Calm under pressure, unshakable discipline. Must be nice to live in your world." Adam turned fully to face her now, his hands resting lightly on his knees. "It's not about being a hero," he said. "It's about perspective. And right now, my perspective is that this flight delay is minor compared to some of the things I've seen." Lauren froze momentarily, caught off guard by his sincerity, but the tension in her chest refused to ease. She rolled her eyes, determined not to let him have the upper hand. "Well, forgive me if I don't have the luxury of comparing this to a war zone," she snapped. "Some of us have real lives to get back to." Adam's face darkened slightly, the first crack in his unyielding calm. "I'm sure your sales pitch is important," he said, his tone still polite but carrying a hint of steel. "But real lives? Let's not downplay what real sacrifice looks like." Lauren bristled. She could feel the eyes of a few nearby passengers flicker toward them, and the added scrutiny only fueled her frustration. She leaned closer to Adam, lowering her voice. "Don't lecture me, soldier boy," she hissed. "I don't need a moral lesson from someone who thinks putting on a uniform makes them superior." Adam's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Lauren thought she might have actually gotten under his skin. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the tension melted from his expression. He gave her a faint, almost pitying smile. "I don't think I'm superior," he said quietly. "But I do think you're carrying a lot of anger for someone who's never met me." Lauren opened her mouth to retort, but the sudden crackling of the intercom interrupted her. A flight attendant announced that turbulence was expected to increase and that all passengers should remain seated. The plane jolted slightly, and Lauren gripped the armrest instinctively. She caught Adam watching her, his gaze steady but not unkind. The jolt wasn't severe, but Lauren's stomach churned with unease. She noticed Adam's calm demeanor, as though he didn't even register the turbulence. That infuriating calmness, it was almost mocking her. "You know," she said, forcing herself to sound casual, "it must be nice to have everything handed to you. A uniform, a rank, automatic respect." Adam's eyes narrowed slightly. "Handed to me?" he repeated, his voice still calm but tinged with a sharp edge. "Ma'am, nothing was handed to me. I earn my rank and the respect I have. Well, that's not automatic. It's built over years of proving yourself." Lauren scoffed, shaking her head. "Right? And I'm sure you never get away with anything because you're a patriot." She made air quotes with her fingers, her sarcasm cutting. "You people love playing the victim card, don't you?" Adam's calm mask slipped slightly, and his gaze hardened. "You people?" he repeated, his voice now low and controlled, but carrying a dangerous edge. "And what exactly do you mean by that?" Lauren realized her mistake immediately but refused to back down. "You know exactly what I mean," she said, though her voice faltered slightly. You act like you're owed something just because you serve. Adam took a slow breath, his expression unreadable now. He leaned slightly closer to her, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't expect anyone to owe me anything, he said. But I also won't sit here and let you insult what I and others have sacrificed for this country. You don't have to like me, but you will respect the uniform. The words hung between them, heavy and charged. Lauren felt her cheeks flush, both from embarrassment and a flicker of shame. Before she could muster a response, the turbulence worsened, sending a ripple of gasps through the cabin. The plane shuddered violently, and Lauren instinctively clutched Adam's arm. For a moment, they were both silent, the tension between them momentarily overshadowed by the physical reality of the flight. Adam didn't pull away. Instead, he placed his other hand over hers, steadying her grip. Just breathe, he said, his voice calm and steady once more. Lauren didn't respond, but she followed his lead, focusing on her breathing until the turbulence subsided. When she finally released his arm, she avoided his gaze, her pride stinging from the vulnerability she'd just shown. The rest of the flight passed in a strained silence. Lauren couldn't bring herself to look at Adam again, though she was acutely aware of his presence beside her. His calm, steady demeanor, which had irritated her so much, now felt almost reassuring. And yet, she couldn't shake the weight of their earlier exchange. As the plane touched down and passengers began to gather their belongings, Lauren stole a glance at Adam. He caught her eye, offering a brief nod before standing to retrieve his bag. Good luck with your real life, he said quietly, his tone devoid of malice but heavy with meaning. Lauren didn't reply. She watched him walk away, feeling a strange mix of anger, embarrassment, and something she couldn't quite name. As the plane continued its descent, Lauren's sharp tone and frequent sighs had drawn the attention of several passengers nearby. A mother with a toddler in the row ahead glanced back, her eyes flickering with quiet disapproval. Across the aisle, an older man subtly shook his head, muttering something inaudible to his seatmate. The whispers, the stolen glances, they didn't go unnoticed by Lauren, though she pretended not to care. Adam, for his part, remained an island of calm. His expression was neutral, almost detached, as if he'd seen far worse than a frazzled woman venting her frustrations. He leaned back slightly in his seat, his gaze returning to the window. His composure only seemed to irritate Lauren further, her mixed emotions bubbling just below the surface. She crossed her arms tightly, her knuckles white from the tension. Great, she muttered under her breath, though loud enough for those nearby to hear. Now I'm the bad guy because I'm not bowing down to Captain America over here. Adam turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. There was no anger in his gaze, only a quiet, steady patience that seemed to unsettle her more than any retort could. I don't think anyone here is judging you, he said, his voice calm but firm. But maybe you should ask yourself why you feel the need to lash out at someone who's done nothing to you. The words hit harder than Lauren expected, cutting through her defenses. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Instead, she looked away, fixing her gaze on the seat back in front of her as her mind raced. Her cheeks burned as she tried to justify her behavior to herself. I'm tired. The delay has been ridiculous. He's the one sitting there like he's better than everyone else. But even as she thought it, the excuses felt hollow. She glanced at Adam again, his calm demeanor now tinged with something else. Pity, perhaps? The idea made her chest tighten. She hated pity. She hated feeling small. And yet, there it was, gnawing at her as the whispers around her seemed to grow louder. A man sitting diagonally across the aisle leaned toward his wife, his voice low but not low enough. Some people just can't handle their emotions, he said, his tone dripping with judgment. Lauren's fists clenched at her sides. She wasn't about to let herself be painted as some unhinged woman while Adam sat there looking like a saint. You know what? She said suddenly, her voice louder than intended. Several heads turned. I'm tired. I've been up since 4 this morning trying to make a connection that the airline screwed up. And I'm not about to apologize for being human. Adam turned to her fully now, his brows slightly raised. His calm voice cut through the growing tension. No one's asking you to apologize, ma'am, he said. But maybe taking your frustration out on strangers isn't the best way to deal with it. Lauren's jaw tightened. Don't patronize me, she snapped. I don't need a lecture from someone who thinks wearing a uniform makes him a hero. A murmur rippled through the nearby passengers, the disapproval palpable. The mother in front of them turned her head slightly, her lips pursed as though she were about to intervene. Adam, however, held up a hand, his voice calm but commanding. It's fine, he said, addressing the small crowd. She's entitled to her opinion. The restraint in his voice was maddening. Lauren could feel her control slipping, the humiliation and anger swirling together in a storm she couldn't contain. Oh, you're so noble, aren't you? She said, her voice rising. Sitting there all stoic and self-righteous. You don't know anything about me or my life, so spare me the judgment. Adam's gaze didn't waver. You're right, he said. I don't know your life. But I know that belittling others doesn't fix whatever's bothering you. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lauren felt the weight of every set of eyes on her, judging her, dissecting her. She wanted to shrink, to disappear, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. Whatever, she muttered, sinking back into her seat. Just leave me alone. The silence that followed was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of the plane's engines and the occasional cough or shuffle from the other passengers. Adam didn't look at her again. He turned back to the window, his posture as composed as ever. Lauren's thoughts spiraled as she stared down at her lap. She hated the way she'd acted, but she hated even more the way Adam had handled it, calm, composed, and utterly unflappable. It made her feel small, like a child throwing a tantrum in public. A flight attendant approached, her expression concerned but professional. Is everything all right here? She asked, her eyes darting between Lauren and Adam. Adam nodded. Everything's fine, he said, his tone neutral. Lauren wanted to say something, anything, to regain some semblance of control over the situation, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she nodded mutely, her face burning with embarrassment. As the plane began its final descent, Lauren stole a glance at Adam. His face was calm, almost serene, as though the events of the past hour had left no mark on him. She envied that calm, that ability to let things roll off him without clinging to his pride or ego. When the plane landed and the passengers began to disembark, Lauren stood quickly, eager to escape the stares and whispers. Adam stepped into the aisle behind her, his movements unhurried. As they reached the exit, he spoke quietly, his words meant for her ears alone. Take care, he said, his tone devoid of malice but carrying a quiet strength that lingered long after he walked away. Lauren watched him go, her emotions a tangled mess of anger, shame, and something she couldn't quite name. For the first time in a long time, she found herself questioning not only her actions but the deeper reasons behind them. The next morning, Lauren's alarm buzzed incessantly, dragging her out of a restless sleep. Her head throbbed, a residual reminder of the tension and embarrassment from the flight the day before. She fumbled for her phone, silencing the alarm and scrolling absent-mindedly through her notifications. Her email and social media feeds were the usual noise, until a headline caught her eye, freezing her mid-scroll. Soldier dies in heroic rescue during humanitarian mission. The article's thumbnail showed a familiar face. Lauren stared at the screen, her breath catching. It was Adam Brooks, the man she had berated for hours on the flight, the soldier who had handled her sharp words with unflinching calm. Her heart pounded as she tapped on the article, dread pooling in her stomach. The news story unfolded with devastating clarity. Adam had been deployed to a region in crisis, delivering aid to civilians trapped in a war-torn area. The convoy he was part of had come under attack. According to eyewitnesses, Adam had shielded a group of children, using his own body to protect them as they were evacuated to safety. He hadn't survived the onslaught. Lauren's chest tightened painfully as she read further. The story painted a picture of a man she had barely known, a decorated soldier, dedicated to his country and his mission, beloved by his unit and respected by the people he served. The article included a quote from one of his comrades. Adam never hesitated. He always put others first. He was a true hero. The word hero jumped out at her, mocking her memory of their flight. She remembered her cutting remarks, the way she had sneered at his uniform, questioned his worth, belittled his calm demeanor. A wave of nausea rolled over her, and she placed the phone down as though it were burning her hand. The room felt smaller, suffocating, as guilt clawed at her insides. How could I have been so cruel? She thought, the memory of his composed response to her outbursts replaying in her mind. He hadn't snapped at her, hadn't retaliated. Instead, he had met her anger with patience, giving her far more grace than she had deserved. Lauren closed her eyes, but the guilt only deepened. She thought of the other passengers, how they had watched her behavior with disapproval, how Adam had remained calm despite her biting words. She had been so consumed by her own frustrations, her own need to lash out, that she hadn't stopped to think about who she was speaking to or why he might be so unshakable. Now it was too late. Determined to learn more about Adam, she reopened the article, her hands trembling. She found links to his biography, stories of his military career, and personal anecdotes shared by friends and family. He had grown up in a small town, the son of a factory worker and a schoolteacher. From a young age, he had dreamed of serving in the military, inspired by his grandfather who had served in World War II. Adam wasn't just a soldier, he had been a son, a brother, a friend. Lauren scrolled through photos of him smiling at charity events, playing with children in refugee camps, and laughing with his comrades. The more she learned, the heavier the weight of her guilt became. One paragraph in particular stayed with her. Adam believed in treating everyone with respect, no matter their background or beliefs. His calm demeanor and steady presence brought comfort to those around him, even in the most dire situations. Lauren's stomach churned. She had been the exact opposite of respectful. She had seen his uniform and made assumptions, her sarcasm fueled by her own exhaustion and biases. And now, she could never apologize, never tell him she regretted her words, never thank him for his service. The humiliation from the flight paled in comparison to the shame she felt now. It wasn't just about how others had seen her, it was about who she had been in that moment. Small-minded, cruel, kind. She spent hours reading about Adam, unable to tear herself away from the articles and tributes pouring in. She learned that he had a fiancée, a woman named Emily, who had been planning their wedding while Adam was on deployment. There was a photo of them together, Emily beaming up at him, her hand resting on his chest where his medals gleamed. Lauren's chest ached at the thought of the grief Emily must be feeling now, the life that had been ripped away from them both. Later that day, Lauren found herself staring out her apartment window, the city below bustling with life. She felt detached from it all, as though she didn't deserve to be part of it. She replayed the flight in her mind over and over, the way Adam had held his composure, the way his calm responses had only frustrated her further. What must he have thought of her? Had he seen her for what she was in that moment? A petty, self-absorbed woman who couldn't see past her own annoyance? The next day, Lauren attended a small memorial service held at a local veteran center. She didn't know why she went. She had no connection to Adam beyond those few hours on a plane, but she felt compelled to honor him in some way. The room was filled with people who had known him, who spoke of his bravery, his kindness, his unwavering sense of duty. Lauren stood at the back, tears streaming silently down her face as she listened to their stories. She didn't speak to anyone, didn't try to explain why she was there. She felt she didn't deserve to. As she left the service, a sense of resolve settled over her. She couldn't undo her behavior on the plane, couldn't take back the words she had thrown at Adam. But she could change. She could be better. She could treat people with the respect they deserved, no matter her own frustrations or assumptions. Adam had sacrificed everything to protect others. The least she could do was learn from him, even if she would carry the weight of her guilt for the rest of her life. Lauren couldn't shake the haunting memories of Adam's calm demeanor on the flight and the devastating news of his sacrifice. Over the following days, she found herself obsessively digging into Adam's life, piecing together fragments of the man she had so callously dismissed. The more she learned, the deeper her guilt grew, and the sharper the sting of her words became. Adam Brooks had grown up in a modest home in a small town nestled among rolling hills. His parents, a factory worker and a schoolteacher, had instilled in him a profound sense of duty and compassion. Even as a child, Adam had stood out for his willingness to help others. Neighbors recalled him shoveling driveways in the bitter winter cold for elderly residents and tutoring younger children who struggled in school. His dream had always been clear: to serve and protect, to leave the world better than he found it. Lauren read about his early years in the military and how he had chosen assignments that emphasized humanitarian efforts. Adam's focus wasn't just on combat. He was deeply involved in rebuilding schools, delivering medical supplies, and coordinating relief for communities ravaged by conflict. He was known among his peers as a man of unwavering courage and relentless kindness, often staying behind to ensure every civilian was accounted for before retreating to safety himself. One article featured an anecdote about a time when Adam had stood up to a corrupt local official who had been siphoning aid meant for starving families. Despite the danger to his own life, Adam had confronted the man publicly, ensuring the supplies reached those in need. The story painted a portrait of a man who was not only brave but unyieldingly principled. As Lauren devoured these stories, she felt her shame deepen. Adam had dedicated his life to helping others, while she had spent their brief encounter tearing him down out of petty frustration. She remembered how she had belittled his uniform, calling him a hero with dripping sarcasm, never once imagining that he truly was one. In her search, she stumbled across a social media page dedicated to Adam's memory. It was filled with heartfelt tributes from people he had touched, both directly and indirectly. One post caught her eye: a message from a young girl in a refugee camp Adam had worked at during a deployment. "Sergeant Brooks gave me hope when I thought there was none. He told me I could be anything I wanted, even though the world felt so dark. I'll never forget him." Lauren's vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. She hadn't just insulted a man on a plane, she had insulted someone who had given so much of himself to make the world a better place. Her casual cruelty felt even more vile in the face of his selflessness. But one detail gnawed at her more than anything else: the consistent thread of racism that had colored her remarks. She recalled with a sickening clarity how she had thrown out the phrase, "you people," her voice dripping with disdain. At the time, she had justified it as frustration, but now she saw it for what it was: a prejudiced attack fueled by ignorance and anger. It made her stomach turn to think that Adam, with all his grace and patience, had borne the brunt of her venom without a single word of retaliation. The more she reflected, the more she realized how Adam's actions had exposed her own failings. He had been a man of quiet strength and integrity, while she had allowed exhaustion and irritation to bring out her worst self. The disparity was glaring, and it filled her with a desperate need to make amends, even if Adam could never hear her apology. In her search for ways to honor Adam's memory, Lauren discovered that he had been working on a project to bring clean water to impoverished villages. The initiative, partially funded by donations, had been one of his passions. Determined to contribute, Lauren donated a substantial amount from her savings. It felt like a drop in the ocean compared to what Adam had given, but it was something, a small step toward redemption. She also began volunteering at a local veteran center, hoping to better understand the struggles and sacrifices of those who served. At first, she felt out of place, unsure if she belonged in such a space. But as she listened to the stories of the men and women there, she felt a shift within herself. Their resilience, their quiet pride, and their camaraderie reminded her of Adam. She found herself opening up, admitting her past prejudices and her guilt over how she had treated him. The veterans were kind, their understanding both a balm and a mirror that reflected her flaws back to her. One day, while cleaning the center's kitchen, she struck up a conversation with a retired Marine who had served with Adam on a previous deployment. The man, grizzled and weathered, spoke of Adam with a mixture of admiration and sorrow. "Brooks was the kind of guy who made you believe in humanity again," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Didn't matter who you were or where you came from, he treated everyone with the same respect. You don't meet people like that every day." Lauren felt tears welling up as she listened. "I didn't treat him with respect," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I was awful to him, and now I can never take it back." The Marine regarded her with a steady gaze. "Sounds like you're trying to make it right," he said after a moment. "That's all any of us can do. Just don't let his sacrifice be wasted. Live better because of it." Those words stayed with Lauren. She carried them as she continued volunteering, as she educated herself about the experiences of others, as she worked to confront and dismantle her own biases. It was a slow process, and the guilt never fully disappeared. But over time, she learned to channel it into action, finding ways to contribute and to honor the legacy of the man she had wronged. Adam Brooks was gone, but his impact remained. In the faces of the people he had helped, in the stories shared by those who knew him, and in the quiet, determined efforts of a woman trying to be better, his spirit endured. Lauren discovered that a foundation had been established in Adam Brooks' honor, dedicated to supporting veteran families and children facing hardship. The mission resonated deeply with her as she continued to grapple with the weight of her guilt and the profound respect she had developed for Adam's legacy. She made a significant donation, hoping it would contribute to the cause Adam had cared so much about. But it wasn't enough. She wanted to do more. Volunteering felt like a way to give not just money, but also time, effort, and heart. The foundation's first major event, a gala in memory of Adam, was held in a community hall adorned with photographs capturing his life. Each image seemed to radiate the quiet strength and kindness that Lauren had so blindly dismissed during their brief encounter. Children who had benefited from the foundation played on the periphery, their laughter a poignant reminder of the lives Adam had touched. Lauren wore a simple black dress, keeping herself in the background as the event unfolded. She didn't feel entitled to the camaraderie of the attendees, veterans, community members, and Adam's family. She was there to serve, not to be seen, so she spent most of the evening organizing auction items and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. Eventually, she saw her chance to approach Adam's mother, Mrs. Helen Brooks. Helen stood near a large portrait of her son, her hand resting on the frame. Her soft smile betrayed the pain in her eyes, the grief she bore with quiet dignity. Lauren hesitated, her palms clammy and her heart pounding. What right did she have to speak to this woman? But she couldn't leave without saying something. "Mrs. Brooks?" Lauren said, her voice trembling. Helen turned, her expression kind but weary. "Yes? I'm Lauren Miller. I met Adam briefly on a flight, shortly before she faltered, struggling to find the words. Helen waited patiently, her gaze steady. "Go on, dear." Lauren swallowed hard, her guilt nearly choking her. "I wasn't kind to him," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I was stressed and I said things I deeply regret. I didn't know who he was, what he stood for. I came tonight because I wanted to apologize. And because I wanted to honor him." For a moment, Helen was silent. Then she reached out, placing a gentle hand on Lauren's arm. "Thank you for telling me that," she said softly. "Adam never held grudges. He would have forgiven you without a second thought." Lauren blinked back tears, overwhelmed by Helen's grace. "I wish I could tell him that I'm sorry. That I admire him." Helen's smile widened, warm and understanding. "The best way to honor Adam is to live with kindness and compassion. He believed in people's ability to change, to do better. If you carry that forward, you're already honoring him." The words settled into Lauren's heart, filling her with both sorrow and hope. "Thank you," she whispered. Over the next weeks, Lauren immersed herself in the foundation's work. She organized fundraisers, delivered supplies to veteran families, and participated in workshops for children in underserved communities. Her initial guilt morphed into a sincere desire to make a difference, inspired by Adam's unwavering commitment to service. One day, during a visit to a veteran support center, Lauren met a young single mother, Michelle, whose husband had died in combat. Michelle was struggling to balance work and raising her 2 children. Lauren sat with her, listening to her story without judgment or interruption. It was a small act, but one that Lauren had learned could mean the world to someone in need. "I don't know how I'm going to manage," Michelle said, tears in her eyes. "You don't have to do it alone," Lauren said gently. "There are people who want to help, myself included." That conversation marked a turning point for Lauren. She began to see opportunities for kindness everywhere. In the tired cashier at the grocery store, in the coworkers struggling with deadlines, in the child nervously presenting a school project. Every interaction became a chance to extend a hand, a smile, or a word of encouragement. But the shadows of her past behavior lingered. At times, she wondered if she was doing enough, if she could ever truly make up for the cruelty she had shown Adam. Yet, every step forward felt like a step closer to becoming the kind of person he would have respected. At another event for the foundation, Lauren met Emily, Adam's fiancée. The two women shared a quiet moment near a table of photographs from Adam's deployments. Emily, her eyes red from tears, looked up as Lauren approached. "You knew Adam?" Emily asked. "Not well," Lauren admitted. "But he changed my life." Emily smiled faintly. "He had a way of doing that, even in the smallest encounters." Lauren told her about the flight, about her behavior, and about how learning of Adam's death had shifted her perspective. Emily listened intently, her expression softening. "I think he'd be proud of you," Emily said. "For trying to do better?" Lauren nodded, the weight of those words settling over her. For the first time since the flight, she felt a small measure of peace. By the end of the year, Lauren's work with the foundation had become a central part of her life. She helped organize a clean water initiative for underserved communities, echoing one of Adam's passions. At a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the first successful project, Lauren stood among the crowd, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. As she watched children splashing in the clean water, their laughter ringing out against the backdrop of a clear sky, she thought of Adam. His face was still etched in her memory, not as the man she had misunderstood on the plane, but as the hero he had proven to be. Lauren would never forget the guilt of her initial behavior, nor would she erase the sting of her words. But through her actions, her willingness to change, and her dedication to helping others, she found a way to honor Adam's legacy every single day.